Hey, Jeremy, thank you so
Hey,
much for sitting down with me today for an episode of Hope Stream. I'm very excited for this conversation. I know we know a lot of people in common, but we've never had a chance to meet and chat. So thank you for coming on.
it's an honor and a privilege. I appreciate you inviting me.
Absolutely. We have a group of parents who follow this podcast, who are part of our community, who are desperately trying to understand their young person, whether that's a child, maybe it's a cousin or a niece or nephew. Somebody in their life is hurting, usually with mental health and substance use issues. And, so I speak from experience. I came into that with my son having zero experience or understanding with either substance use or addiction. And so that's why I love these conversations, because I learn so much from folks who have been through it, and we'll get your story. And it's just so eye-opening for us to hear all these different perspectives. And I know a bit about what you guys do at Making Whole, and I just absolutely love it. And so wanted to nab some of you and your insight and wisdom and story to really bring understanding to our parents, who are sponges for like, tell me more, tell me more. So we appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Looking forward to it.
So I read on your website a little story, and you can decide if it's appropriate to start there or more of the origin story of your experience, your lived experience. But there was a story that you wrote about an owl, which I just love all that stuff. Like, I am a big person. Like, now you know what's going to happen later today. I'm going to go somewhere. I'm going to see an owl.
You
So
will.
would love to have you talk about that. But you choose whether you'd like to start there or with your story and just sort of fill us in on why we are sitting here talking today.
Yeah, I think all the stories will tie back to an origin story, so that's probably as good a place to begin as any. In 2015, my brother-in-law and close friend committed suicide, and I'd spent a week kind of facilitating a funeral and being engaged in the things that come after that sort of tragedy. And I was exhausted. It really took it out of me. And it was not the first time. He's the second person who was actually a member of my wedding party to die. And I have lost count of the number of acquaintances and a lot of close friends who have died either from suicide or from overdose.
Mm.
And so it's this, I could have gone into the eulogy business as well as I could, the business I'm in, because that particularly from about 2015 to, the last couple of years, it's tapered down a little bit. So anyway, I'm burying all my friends, and it's one of the things about death is it really kind of puts a fine edge on the experience of being present in that day, right? And so one of the things I like to say about funerals and about that moment after death is that those were some of the richest and most important moments in my life. They were intense, but they were real. And it's as real as it gets. And it's a lot. And so when I came home from that week, I woke up in the morning and I was just out of it. I was struggling to kind of make sense of how I was going to spend my day and kind of put things together. And I heard this big commotion out in my front yard, and it sounded like a bunch of crows kind of going mad. And I was kind of dazed and confused. I went out to see what was going on, and the crows were on the roof raising hell, and there was an owl sitting right by my front stoop. And the story of the owl is the story of this experience of sitting down with this owl at this moment where I'm kind of like at my end and trying not to make too much of it. I live in Asheville, and there's a lot of crystal lickers and hippies here that will immediately see an animal and like that means something. And it's to the point that it's like hyperbole, and I don't want to contribute to that. So I'm thinking to myself, like, oh, I've had this experience. This owl and I sat together on my front porch for a long time, a couple of feet from each other, this thing just staring at me and me staring back and trying to make sense of it. And some of the significance of an owl is they are surround death, in old mythology and folklore. They're strangely a creature that has a very dark story. A lot of times you read a story about a spirit animal or something and it's like, oh, this this animal represents, and everything that comes after that is good and whole. You've seen an animal on the side of the road and you think, oh man, the world's sending me good omens. It's not the case with an owl. An owl's all over the map, but they're oftentimes around death. And so I don't want to make too much of this. I kind of go on about my day. I've taken the day off of work, and so I don't often get to pick my children up from school. And so my wife says, you want to come get the kids? And the kids are in two schools right next to each other. And my daughter walks through the woods to get to where my son is so we can pick him up at the same time. And so we're sitting there waiting, and my daughter pops up out of the woods and has a sticker of an owl right here on her forehead. And that's when I realized, like, I didn't make this up. I had not told anybody this story at that point. So anyway, there's a longer story. You can read it. It's on the website about that. But one of the things that did for me is it helped me to recognize that it was time for me to explore, why are these people dying, and is there anything I can do? I got sober in 1995. So I would have been sober 20 years. And part of the reason I know so many people who are dead is because I know a lot of people with addiction, mental health issues. And one of the things I felt overwhelmingly is that there's not a place that the people that I knew the best, I knew a lot of them wanted to get better and were receptive to a certain type of help that didn't exist in the world. And that felt like a big hole. Like there's a big hole in the world where the way we treat addiction is like a medical thing. But it doesn't feel like that to me. I feel like that's a gross assessment of what the experience of addiction is like and what the experience of recovery is like. And so as these guys were in their kind of darkest moments, where do they go? I don't know where you send these people. And even if I did, what is it that those places are doing that's going to actually help somebody get better? And so that journey in 2015 is what inspired Making Whole, which is an apprenticeship program. We teach men how to build furniture effectively. And so where that originates from is when I started going through this exercise of like, why do people get better or not get better? Is it a fluke? Is it a crapshoot? Is it magic? What is it? The first thing I started doing is going back through my history and considering, who do I know that's gotten better and what are the common denominators amongst those people, right? So at this point in my life, it's not out of the question to say I know thousands of people that have entered into recovery from addiction. And so I've got to see these people now for decades and see them through their ups and downs and kind of level out, look at the whole of their experience and see who's getting better and who's not. And at that point, my metric of getting better is that this is somebody that at 20 years, I would trade for what they have, right? These are that I want what they have, right? And even people that are maybe don't have as much time or haven't arrived at the sort of abundance that I have in my life, you can see that they're on that trajectory. So that's the group of people. What makes them all the same? And there's two things that was true in every one of their lives. And one of them is that they all have a story about a person at the beginning, without exception. And I don't know any stories about transformation where there's not a guide. I've never really heard a story. There's always a story when somebody's embarking on transformation where there's a guide, there's a mentor, there's somebody, and it's not always a formal version of that. It's not always somebody that calls themselves a mentor or coach, but it's these people latched on to what they had. They wanted what that person had and were willing to do something to get it. The other thing that was more interesting to me is that all of these people, either as their profession or their principal hobby, spent their day solving complicated problems. And so they were creative people, they were entrepreneurs, they were, athletes, mothers. Like a lot of these people were mothers, and there's mother by right of the fact that you've given birth. And then there's this group of mothers who are like, this is what I'm doing. I'm raising kids. That's what I do. Right. And so I couldn't find somebody that didn't have this thing that introduced new complicated problems every day. And there was this thing that would happen in their lives where they would enter into recovery and they would kind of like get their feet solid. And then they would embark on this profession or hobby or principal sort of vocation in their life. And then something about what they learned in their vocation transferred back to their recovery. And that's when recovery got real and authentic and meaningful for them. And it's almost like they needed something that belonged to them, like their own lens to figure out, how do I navigate through life? They needed something that was meaningful to teach them how to do that. Right. And so what transformation is that everything I'm doing is new. Right. When I was early in recovery, I got sober young. Everything was new. And so the real question for me is, when somebody's early in recovery, what tools are they equipping themselves with to negotiate something that's unpredictable? That's really the question, right? Because no matter what somebody's circumstances, who they are, where they come from, what their list of diagnoses are, what their financial circumstances are, we can be certain that every day this person's going to negotiate with something new for which they previously didn't have tools to negotiate. And so how are you going to give them those tools? So that's when that became clear. One of the other things that became clear is I've been a studio craftsman for a long time, pushing 30 years. And I had a studio for a long time. Majority of the people I hired were new to recovery because that was who I knew to hire. And that's who would do shitty work for not a lot of money, And every year for a decade following that studio being sold and me going on to other things, somebody would come to me and say, I just need to tell you that working in your shop is what changed my life. That was the moment. And I heard that so many times from so many different types of people that showed up to me that didn't have teeth, literally, that have PhDs now. And as they reflect back on their life, what they're saying is that this was the moment. It was about every day something was fresh and new. It was about being socially among a group of men, about having a principal task that everybody had to accomplish. It was about the uncertainty that we don't know if we're going to get there. All the work that the shop that I ran did was people came to me when they didn't have an obvious solution to a problem. They would bring it to us and we would come up with a new solution. We didn't make the same thing twice. Yeah, I've made very few things twice in my life. And so they were always seeing something different. It was fresh, it was interesting. But there was this fabric that in the structure of this place that was changing people. And so that all brings me back to why I started this place is that what I realized is that I have a sense of what got me better. I have a sense of what got other people better. And what I need is a structure and an environment where those things can take place, right? And when we talk about those things, we're talking about having a place where people can learn to fail and suffer among other people, kind of having a scaffolding around them as they fail and suffer, having lots of opportunities to learn how to negotiate with problems that they're not familiar with tools that they're not familiar with, lots of opportunities to have social connection that's both challenging and rewarding, and opportunities just to learn how to do simple things well in life. Sit down, take time to eat, take time to clean up after yourself. These basic things that we all successful people learn how to do. And so that's what the sort of seed for this place is. Can we create an environment where people come and they're exposed to that? And most importantly, people want to be here. And this isn't jail. People can leave whenever they want, and the people who stay here want to be here. And it's evolved a lot. I've learned a lot over the time. What I will say about this place is that we've had 55 people enroll here we opened in 2018. And of those 55 people, 33 have completed the program. And completion is different for different people. Basically, we all arrived, their team that's around them, myself, them, arrived at a point where it's like, this is the moment to move on. And for some guys, that's 9 months. For some guys, that's been 4 years. It's a big range. Mm-hmm. Not a definitive date. There's not a certificate. But of the 33 people that have completed this program, 30 of them will tell you in their own words that they're where they want to be in their life. And so what I know about this place is that the people who show up here, a large majority of them stay. And of the people who stay, they get better. The people that don't get better are an exception to the rule.
Incredible. When I think about what the typical journey is for a person, and I'm curious to know a little bit about the age group that you tend to work with, but for, let's just say young adults, maybe they're in their 20s, if they are able to go to detox and maybe they sort of do a 30-day, program where they've gotten the drugs out of their system and they're getting some therapy, and then there's just so little available for okay, the drugs are out of the system, but that's, you may be sober, but you're in no way in recovery or equipped to even know how to build a life of recovery. I think you said it's such a gap. There's just I see this cliff where some people can afford to go to sober living, which maybe provides some structure and, some guardrails, but a lot can't. Most can't. 90% can't afford that. And so what you say about this need for community, for a purpose, for solving problems, for doing the basics over and over and over is really hard to find, right? I mean, it's such a simple thing, but it's also such a thing that's so hard to find. Does that make sense?
It's strange, but it makes sense.
Okay.
No matter what the model is, and we could talk about the medical model and the traditional model of treatment or the work that we're doing, all of it requires a lot of time, which in today's world equates to money. Right?
Yes. Yes.
One of the holes we're filling is social fabric that kind of started to dissolve in our society long ago. That's hard to find now, right? And so maybe the things that we offer would have been more easily found in different types of groups, church groups, Boy Scouts, whatever, at a time before social media, right? So those places don't exist. And those are the only places, along with 12-step programs, that the exchange of time is not financial, right?
Yes.
Otherwise, it's financial. And so as a result, this comes back. I think I'll step back and say, what's the problem that we're trying to solve? And so as you say, like, recovery, they get all these things and they're sober and they're in recovery, but there's something missing. It implies to some extent that the problem is drug use. And the problem's not drug use.
Right.
It's never been drug use. The solution is drug use. And so as we identify what is addiction and what's the problem, for me, I have an older sister and a younger sister. They both use drugs. I have 2 children. They've both used drugs. My wife and I both have experience with addiction. So raising 2 kids who are a lot like us.
Oh boy.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I know what it means to be a parent and like, oh shit, where are we going? And I know where we're going.
Yeah,
right?
you've been there.
I've been there, right? But these people didn't have the same experience and immediately tail off into addiction the way I did. And so historically, we've thought about this as a genetic thing. There's a real desire to tie this to something chemically imbalanced inside of me, right? And part of what that sources from is when AA starts in the 30s, addiction was moral. Like, you're just a piece of shit. That's why you drink, right? And nobody's going to get better if that's the problem. Because the more you feel shame about being morally bankrupt, the more it feels good to drink, right? So that's a catch-22. And Bill and the people that started AA recognize that. And there's a doctor that says, I think this is a disease. I've got no proof for that. There's no science behind it. But that's like the best explanation I have for what phenomenon you're experiencing is. And Bill, and this is all written pretty plainly, Bill's like, I don't know if that is real or not, but I'm going to run with that because it solves this other problem. It takes us off the moral hook. And from that point forward, this is like a placeholder, which happens in a lot of science. Hey, maybe it's something like this. Let's see what the world looks like through that lens. And then it's stuck. And then you fast forward to now it needs to be a disease because insurance is not paying for it for any other reason, right? And so a lot of our understanding of where this comes from begins at that story, which was never intended to be considered science, right? So is it genetic? Is it chemical? What's going on? What I know is that when I did drugs, if you give me a list of the top 10 problems in my life, doing drugs solved 9 of them instantly. Now, when my sisters did it, it solved 3 of them, right? And at the same time, it might have made 2 of them worse, right? And so most people who experience the euphoria that comes from drinking or getting high or whatever it is, there's this scales, right? And there's some qualities to it. And then there's some other aspects of it. It just doesn't quite do it. But here I am, way too sensitive. I experience everything physically, right? Everything that happens. You look at me away and I have a feeling that connects to that with everything that's going on. People that I'm not even close to across the room from me can look away and I can have a feeling, right? And it was debilitating for me.
Yeah.
Even though I could socially hold that and look, put together, it was a debilitating experience for me. So I'm hypersensitive. I'm probably too intelligent for my own good. And the combination of being really smart And really sensitive is pretty like devastating experience to have. And then I have all these other things. I got anxiety. I got all the things that come with being a kid, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Socially awkward. I don't know where I fit. I've got no sense of like drive and purpose. I did fine in school. I did all the things that society asked me to do, and I was empty. And when I got high, all those things changed. It like leveled out my sensitivity and replaced it with euphoria, right? So instead of feeling, like this knot in my gut, that knot like dissolved instantly, right? I had a reason to be social, right? It gave me a social purpose, right? Now we can all kind of band together around this thing. There's a big social component to it.
Right.
These things solved for me, right? And it wasn't for other people. Now, here's what I know about my brain is that our brain is looking for things that work, and if we're doing something new, we're using a lot of brain energy to do that thing. Doesn't matter what it is, learn to throw a ball with your left hand. Your brain hurts at the end of the day, right? And then your brain figures out the rhythm, and then it doesn't have to have the same thought process. It just thinks that works. I'm just going to do it. No thought required, right? And that's a basic human survival, like animal survival thing. The brain uses a lot of fuel. We got to conserve fuel in order to survive. So as soon as something becomes functionally solving the problem, brain puts that in the back, puts it into like the Excel spreadsheet. It makes a code out of it, and you don't have to see the code ever again. You don't have to remember how you wrote the code. Every time you plug something in, that it spits out that number, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, and I think this is true for every human, when something works, our brain's like, got to do that again, right? And so instantly for me, when I get high, it's like, oh shit, we just solved 9 problems. Boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And now anytime any one of those things comes up, what I'm going to tell you is that like starts to put you on the level where you just met God, right? All problems disappear with one thing. And I promise anybody that has that experience, their brain's going to do with that what brains do, and they're going to struggle with addiction, right? A lot of people won't have that experience and they're not going to struggle with addiction. So I think it's a very normal response. I do not believe it's a disorder. Now, what happens is when that's the only solution I have, there's natural problems that occur in life where problems are more nuanced and complex, and they change and life changes. And if this is your only tool, and that tool actually has negative impacts on both yourself and the people around you, it's going to become a problem. But it's not a disorder. My brain did that, right? It did what it was supposed to do. And so here's the problem, is that the only solution I have for existing in the world is drugs. And one of the reasons why I got to the point where I was willing to address that problem is because it was increasingly not working. So I would do this thing and it wouldn't produce the results, right? And it got me to a point where I was huddled in the corner of a room in a flop house that if I explained it to somebody, it would sound like hyperbole. It would sound like Hollywood got a hold of a script.
Right.
And drew up a flop house, right? This kind of play.
Netflix series.
It's a Netflix series. It's horrible. It's like one of those series where you watch it and you're like, man, y'all overdid that a little bit. That's not real life. That was the kind of place that I was in. Huddled in a corner. That was the corner where I could see somebody come in the room from any entrance before they could see me, because that was the safest place to be. And I was like in paralysis, and no amount of drugs were fixing it. And so to me, at that point, I'm like open in a way I hadn't been prior to that, to something big. So this problem is I have no tools to exist in life. I've got no tools. There's increasingly not an invitation in the world to become a man when you're a boy, right? So here I am, I'm a boy in a man's body. There's no invitation to grow up and enter into the world of men. And I've got no tools to exist. That's the problem that we need to solve. Now, so if we look at the solutions that are on offer for that, there's not a lot of great solutions, right?
No.
I believe in detox. I believe that for a couple of reasons, even if the drug that somebody's addicted to is not there's not a medical necessity for detox. It just hits the pause button for 5 minutes and gives somebody a chance to breathe. That is a medical reality. For a moment there, we just need the chemistry to calm down, get some food in your body. I'm 175 now. I was 125 pounds when I got sober.
Wow.
I was wrecked, and I just needed to eat, sleep a little bit, and just calm down, right? I think that that's great. I think having a period of time where there's an education about what I'm up against, which happens in treatment and certain types of therapies, was really valuable intellectually to start to recognize like, oh shit, they told me about that. That's useful. I think having that be the principal fuel for recovery is a wild misassessment of what the problem is, right? So I got some of those things when I got sober. I went to a treatment center. It took me a decade to recover from the trauma I experienced in the first treatment center I went to. It was a really not a great place to be. And then here I was left with no ability to live, no desire to stay sober for a moment, not a particular desire to get high because it was so difficult for me, but no real purpose in life. And so, yeah, there's not a lot of options on how do you get from here to there? Somebody that has no skills to exist, right? And those skills are broad. There's plenty of people that excel in certain areas, whether that be school or work or relationships, but the skills to live, which is this dynamic experience, social, emotional, cultural, all the responsibilities that come with surviving, that's what I have to learn how to do.
So much in there. You just said, I'm like madly taking notes because my brain is like all of it. A couple of things that I just wanted to trace back to. One is what you said about the hypersensitivity. It is the common denominator that
100%.
I see in
100%.
Sensitivity and the intelligence, the high level of giftedness. I'm guessing maybe some learning differences. It's like that is the template for these young folks who are,
Boom, bellows you the fuck out. Cocaine pushes you past it. It's a great medicine. It is 100% medicine. If you look at historically, why do we take Ritalin and not cocaine? Why do we take, any given thing and not weed? It's like socio-political. It's not because chemistry doesn't make sense, right? It's socio-political. And that's okay. It is what it is. We don't really know how to do this collectively, but absolutely it's medicine and it works.
Yes, it totally works. And also what you said about that kind of that tipping point that you got to of, well, it was solving more problems than it was creating. So that's cool. But then the scales start to tip the other way. And when you're in the flop house, curled up in the corner, paralyzed, and you're realizing, oh, actually not solving as many problems. What I wonder, I'm so curious about that moment that you have the clarity of mind, as sick as I'm sure you were horribly sick and all the things, that you can be in a position where you're that ill and emotionally, spiritually, physically, everything, and still have the wherewithal to say, I need something different.
So I want to explain what that something different was. I kind of lost the plot on New Year's Eve, took a list of drugs that really flipped out. And it's a long story. I don't want to get into it. I woke up the next day. I was like, something's got to change. And something's got to change. When I woke up, I was certain something got to change. And by lunchtime, I was fucking blasted. And I don't have much recollection of what happened over the next 9 days. But during that period of time, I fashioned that it would be a good idea for me and two of my friends to steal somebody's car and drive to Florida to sell a bunch of drugs so we can make enough money to then drive a VW bus to New York. This is all from Atlanta, and sell a bunch of drugs. And we were going to make, because we'd heard that Syracuse was dry, and we were going to make $10,000. And in 1995, $10,000, in my mind, the logic is that's the golden sunset.
Right.
So we stole a car. We went down to Florida. We bought a bunch of drugs. We were driving back. The person driving didn't have a license. And then the two of us that were in this stolen car full of drugs were both on probation in a different state.
Perfect.
And we got thrown in jail. Yeah.
Perfect idea.
That was my solution, was this. And it made perfect sense in my mind that if I get $10,000, I'm that's the end of this. That's golden sunsets.
Yeah.
That's it. Right. It's hilarious. Nothing I thought made sense. So anyway, I get thrown in jail in Florida, probation in Atlanta. I was in some trouble. Right. And so my mom and grandparents come down to pick me up. My mom from Atlanta, my grandparents from South Georgia, and they got me, and I was so vile. And for a couple of hours, it was just a tirade I was on. I don't know what I was on about. But I know here's the real issue, is that even though my solution wasn't working, nobody had ever presented a solution to me that seemed reasonable. And the people that had presented the solution that I should stop doing what worked were my family and authorities. So what I was certain about, even though I was certain that this isn't working like I need it to, I was also certain the biggest enemy were this group of people. And so even though I'm broken, I'm terrified, I'm scared of jail, what my parents and grandparents caught from me for the next couple of hours is like, makes my gut turn, you know?
Yeah.
And I ended up in a treatment center. So I ended up in a treatment center like 3 days in, and I was facing as much time in jail as I had been alive at that point. And I'm freaking out about it. And one of the orderlies, or whatever you want to call them in this place ended up getting shut down because they were like abusive to people at the end. But it was one of these places, you know, I was locked up in this building. It was like a central room where you had to pull your mattress out into the room to sleep every night underneath fluorescent lights so that you didn't hang yourself with shoelaces or whatever. And so I told this orderly, like, look, I'm freaking out. I'm about to spend as much time in jail as I've been alive. This is ridiculous. What do I do? And he said, why don't you pray about it? And I told him, like, why don't you fuck off?
Yeah.
You know, like,
Come on, man.
Pray about it. Right. So anyway, I'm pulling my mattress out of the room to put it out in the hallway that night. And I'm on my knees getting my mattress situated. And I said a prayer. I was like, what the fuck? That was the prayer. What are you going to do? The next day I got a call from my mom. She said, look, I just talked to the judge in Florida and your files have disappeared. There's no record of your files. And they never found out you got thrown on probation in Atlanta.
What?
And so that was like the bell ringing, like, oh, there's something to this, right? Now, I will tell you a thing about storytelling and about parents, mothers. There's a lot of mothers listening to this.
Yes, there are.
As soon as I told that story, like my mom, car salesmen hate my mom because she is not leaving until she gets what she wants, right? This is what I'm going to buy this car for.
Yes.
And the tactics that work with every normal human being don't work with them. And so there's a lot of moms that heard this story and said, your files didn't disappear. Your mom made a deal with the judge. And that deal was either, I'm not getting off the phone until they disappear, or, hey, let me take this. And the judge was like, I don't want to deal with this kid anyway. But my experience of that story is that the files disappeared. And there was no good explanation for that story. And so anyway, I'm like, wow, this is amazing. Something good's got to happen. My very next plan, which was slightly more favorable to go sell a bunch of drugs in Florida and take them to New York, was that I was, I don't know, half an hour outside of Atlanta. There's no public transit to where I was going to get out of this treatment center. I was going to walk to Atlanta and I was going to rent a house and get a job and live happily ever after. And that was totally sensible to me. And everybody would look at me like they often did when I was newly sober, like, what are you talking about, man? Like nothing made sense that I said, right? It made perfect sense to me. Didn't make sense to me. And I'm like, no, that's what I'm going to do. Like, why are you trying to stop me? And they said, well, the other thing you could do is you go to this other place and we'll just pick you up and take you there. Do you want to do that? And I was like, well, you know, and the truth of the matter is it was easier. That's why I did it. That's why I went to the next place and eventually ended up in a sober living underneath the mentorship of a man who saved my life, was because that option was provided to me. And it was easier than my other option. But when I'm getting sober, going back to the experience that I have with drugs, the value proposition is the Monty Python skit, cake or death. And the guy's like, let me think about that. And that's what it was for me too. And that's the way it appears to people. Like, here's the real experience I'm having, is that I've only experienced ease in this really specific environment. And the place I've experienced the most discomfort in my life is around these authority figures, parents, around dancing for society. I don't believe in society. I don't like society. Like, none of these things solve my problem. So part of my resistance to the world is really a survival instinct to try to protect the thing that works.
Sure.
And so what people are saying is you got to get sober. You got to quit doing drugs and be sober. And what that sounds like is like you got to give up the only thing that's ever made you feel okay in your own skin. And what you get in exchange for that is to go back to how you felt before you had it. And that's a bad value proposition.
That is a bad value proposition right there.
What I experience with every drug addict is that every drug addict has a cost-benefit analysis calculator in their head that is completely dialed in.
Yeah.
And if the cost-benefit doesn't make sense to you, it's because you don't understand the benefit that they get. That's the only reason why it doesn't make sense. Their cost-benefit analysis works perfectly. Based on my experience, when I get high, even in the worst places where I'm huddled up in the corner, I feel safer there, in a place that they would write a movie about how unsafe it is. I feel safer there than I do at college, or than I do in a church, or that I do anywhere else. That's how so when people see me trying to protect my right to stay in this place that's nasty, graffiti on the wall, dog shit on the floor, dishes piled up, people shooting guns out randomly in the house, cops breaking in, fires set. Like, this place was pure chaos. I felt safer there. And so why I'm protecting my right to stay in that chaos is because I've never experienced anything better. But as soon as you offer me something better, I take it. And I've never met somebody with addiction problems for whom that wasn't the case. The challenge is, how do you fashion a value proposition that somebody's willing to take? That's the real dilemma. And as we're talking about treatment, that's the only real valid conversation I believe we need to be.
Yeah, I was good. Oh gosh, I love the cost benefit calculator. It's so true. And I think what's so mind-numbingly difficult for parents to understand is because we don't have the same experience as our kid. We are looking at this situation and we're thinking in our mind, but you have a beautiful home, but you have a beautiful family. You have a caring community around you. You have a private school that we pay $20,000 a year for you to go to, right? We're ticking the list
Your
of
cost
things.
benefit. That's
My
yours.
cost benefit.
Exactly.
And we can't understand and wrap our head around, how is that not what you need?
Right.
It's so obvious, right? Because that would be my benefit.
You say that to me, and then I say to you, look, I do this one thing that solves all my problems. Why wouldn't you do that? And you're basically saying there's a fight, and if you were to go back and get the stenographers to translate, what's happening, you're saying the same thing. Why aren't you doing what works for me? And they're like, well, why are you trying to take away what works for me? It doesn't make any sense. My experience is when people recognize that, the conversation changes. What I will say, one of the issues with treatment is metrics, right? There's no metrics for any of the work that's being done. And the reason why is because it's complicated. Like, how do you measure success? It's tough. So as I'm developing the work I'm doing and I'm deciding what's my litmus test for whether what I'm doing is working or not, one of the principal things that I want to be certain of is that anytime somebody walks out the door here, that the questions they're asking are different. So if I've equipped you with a set of tools and you are asking different questions about your life, there's a chance that's something you're going to carry with you the rest of your life, right?
Right.
There is no treatment on the planet that can be done in a year, period. Nobody's coming out of a year of treatment or 2 years or 4 years of treatment. Done.
Yeah.
It's not possible. So if you've only got somebody for a year, the question is, what do you want them to leave with? And so what I know is that you're going to be running up against problems that I can't even anticipate. How are you going to address those problems? And that's going to be reflected in the questions that you're asking, right? And so while that's applicable for the person that's suffering with addiction, it's also applicable to the parents, right? And so if you find yourself as a parent describing what you just described, which is like, this doesn't make sense to me, right? You're asking the wrong questions. Why is somebody so protective of this thing? Now, historically, if this is a disorder and a disease and this person's just broken, then that's the explanation for it, right? And as a result, the parent never finds out who the kid is.
Right.
It takes everybody off the hook, and we can just point at this thing. We can point at this like singularity. And what we are really good as a society at solving is problems that are a singularity. If there's a tumor that we can find, we can solve it.
Yes.
But as soon as things become decentralized and complex, we can't solve it, right? So that singularity is a really useful thing in feeling safe because there's not as much uncertainty. But that's the problem with addiction, is it's not a singularity. It's this whole experience. It's our whole brain, mind, body, and spirit's all connected. And so we're going to need a more complex mechanism to solve that problem. So my experience, I'll tell you a story. This is a useful story for a lot of people. I'm sure there are parents who are experiencing this. One of the things I found out after I'd been sober quite some time is that my parents and I were talking. My parents and I have a great relationship now, and we have since I got sober. And they had been counseling, they had been doing parent groups back in the 90s, trying to figure out what to do. But they were at a therapist, and the therapist, it comes out in therapy that they're on the verge of this situation with me, destroying their marriage. And the therapist gave them a proposition. You're either going to save your son or you're going to save your marriage, and you need to choose which. And what I'm here to tell you is that you can't save your son. So what are you going to do? And they went back and talked about it and decided we're going to focus on our marriage. And it was the most, if there's one thing that's changed my life from an external source more than anything else, it's that decision that they made at the time that they made it. And the reason why is because they took their eyes off of me. And one of the things about inviting a boy to be a man, and if you read mythology about this journey, there is this moment where you are on your own. And every rite of passage has this kind of moment where the elders look away and leave you in the wild, right? And that's, in a sense, what my parents did, is they left me in the wild. And so what they got really good at is that they are focused on themselves and building their life together and figuring out what they needed to do for themselves. And then as I needed support and help, which young adults need, there was a really specific negotiation that would take place where I would come and ask for help. They didn't offer help to me. They didn't see something falling apart in my life and offer help. They only offered help when I asked for it. I would go ask for help and they would stop the conversation and say, we're going to go talk and we'll come back to you. We'll tell you what we've decided. And there were so many messages in that. And this was at a time in my life where I was incapable of making a living. I was incapable of bathing myself. I was incapable of doing laundry, buying clothes, anything, all the basic things you think somebody needs in order to be an adult. I was incapable of any of it. And their response to that was, when you need help, you ask for it. And until then, you got this. And that message, one of the things that I took from that is that, oh, I've got this, right? It's a little bit like when a kid falls and scrapes their knee. There's a certain parent, oh God, what's happened? The kid's horrified. The kid's like, what am I supposed to do? Right? Am I broken? Or is everything okay? And then there's the parents like, oh, you're okay. Dust yourself off. Let's go. And the kid kind of, oh, okay. And they get up. And if they're really hurt, they'll say as much, right? It was a similar thing that my parents did by saying, you got this. And I heard that message is like, oh, I got this. I'm going to go do that. And so as a result, I got sober at 17. At 17 years old, I was given an invitation to be a man unknowingly, right? It wasn't like defined rite of passage. It was that my parents decided they needed to take care of the damn selves. And that's the most important thing. I think so much as we look back at this problem, so much of the problem seems to be it's safest if the singularity is the individual. And that's not the truth, right? There's a dynamic that's taking place that supports all the dysfunction and everybody's a part of that. And so like my invitation to any parent is who are you meant to be? So ultimately what I believe my work is to do, I believe everybody who walks through my doors has a message that's been with them since they were born about who they were meant to be. And that message is either kind of clear, not clear, but it's everybody recognizes that. Every human. I've got this sense I'm supposed to be this. Right. I believe that's what we're here to do, is just to become that, right? Now, the most powerful thing is somebody who is becoming that. If you see somebody who is becoming who they were meant to be, there's something so profound about being in the presence of those people. And you might not be able to picture that that's what it is, but they're in their own skin. The way they carry themselves, the way they carry their body, everything is reflective of the fact that this person is focused on becoming who they were meant to be. That's all our jobs. The most powerful thing you can do for your child is to do that. More important than everything else that we're being taught to do as parents is be that person. Humans, especially drug addicts who are so sensitive, pick up on everything. That right there is such a beacon to say, this is what it looks like to become who you're meant to be, you know? And so it's like, I think for me, and I suspect every mother can relate with a son, can relate to this, is that my mom's fear was revulsive to me. Her panic. And part of the reason why is that I need help. And so what I need to do is I need to find somebody who's not afraid.
Yes.
Right? If, you know, you see a war movie and everything starts going sideways and there's that one person that's going around crazy, like, shit, what do we do? And then there's the one person that's quiet and assessing the situation and calm. The person you want to run to is not the person that's freaking out. Yep. Right. And that's what, you know, that energy is. And so much of the violence between young men and their mothers is about that. Hey, I need you to fucking pick yourself up by your bootstraps. Yeah. I need you to pull it together and like, we got to figure this out. Right.
Yeah. 100%.
So again, it's that signal. And so my parents did a massive service to me to give me the signal that it's time for me to be an adult. And it's not because they meant to do that. It is because they listened to a professional and did what that professional said. I also know that one of the most important parts of that is that it told me in the way they negotiated with help is that they weren't going to, like, I couldn't manipulate them for the things I needed.
Yes.
Right. And so in my scale, in my cost benefit analysis, right, if there's always an escape hatch, right, if I can always pull the escape hatch and parachute away and land comfortably, why not take a risk?
Heck yeah.
Let's take a risk. Let's fuck around and find out, right?
Let's do it.
If that hatch is broken, you're not flying the plane the same. You're like, oh man, I better land this thing because there's not an escape hatch, right? And that message I've met very few people to get better who didn't receive that message from their parents. There's
Yeah.
no escape hatch, dude. You're on your own. I'm focused on me. I will support you in these ways, right? And that
Yeah.
support is, oftentimes financial. A lot of times where we had that discussion, it was financial. And part of the reason for that is that the other needs that I had, I didn't need to get them met from my parents at that.
Right.
Part of being an adult is going out into the world and finding the people who can meet those needs for you.
There's like 11 things I want to say about all of that. But the first is when you talk about we need to let them become who they are. And that's the process that you get to see. I think there's a big problem from the parent standpoint is that many of us don't know who we are.
100%.
We are lost. We never got to become who we wanted to be and needed to be.
Mhm.
So we're living in this tension of, wow, this was exactly true for my son. I so hated the fact that he was not willing to bend to what I wanted him to be. He was like, oh, hell no, I'm not, I'm not going to be and I hated that about him. And it wasn't until I worked with some good therapists to understand that they said to me, because you want that. You want to be what he is being right now. You want to say, no, I'm not going to be the perfect this or the whatever. So while we're over here trying to control and morph and mold, and contain our kids into what we think they should be, and they're fighting against that, we're fighting the same battle inside ourselves. I think a lot of the time, not everybody, obviously, but I think a lot of times we are. So I think it is so important for us to have that professional help ourselves to start peeling away at our own onion layers. Like, we got to peel this back and find out, why do I look at what he's doing, which is admirable, to be his own person, to be unique. He beats to his own drum beat. And I hated that. And now I just admire it so much in him, that
I
no
think
one's
one of the
going
things too, about being a parent, when I was maybe like 9, me and a buddy went down to the park because that's what we did. It's a couple blocks away from our house. You go to the park and you just come back when it's kind of dark, or you hear a bell ring or something. That was like me growing up, right? You see these memes about growing up in the 70s and the 80s, right?
feral kids.
We were all feral, right? And,
Yeah.
and parents were like, "Ooh," they're like, shit, yeah, get out of the house. Like, we don't want you here stinking the place up. So we go build this wooden ramp for our bikes. It was about as absurd as my plan to go sell drugs in Florida. And first jump off the ramp, Justin just nosedives and breaks his arm in half, to the point that you can make out the bone sticking through his skin, right? And so we go back, we're like, Mom, Justin hurt himself. We think it's bad, And she looks at it, she's like, it's not that bad, but we'll just take you to the doctor, And she was like, oh, you could see his bone sticking out. And we took him to the doctor and he got a brace and he went home. That was it. That's the end of the story. Now I want you to picture, that's not the end of the story today. Like, you let my kid break his arm. Like, what kind of parent are you? Right? Like, the whole point is we got to keep our kids safe, right? So I think about how I grew up versus how my children, and the dialogue around my children and the other parents with the kids the same age. And you're not allowed to fuck up.
Yeah.
Like, you will get cast out of society. You'll get cast out if you're the overseer of somebody that hurts themselves. And so that's a kind of a widespread notion now about being a parent. Now, when you put that up against, oh, my kid might rob you. My kid might rob you. And so, like, a kid just like saying a bad word is bad, and my kid might rob you. Oh God, that puts us in a panic, right?
Totally.
And so part of like what it means to be a parent, what it means to be an individual, what it means to be a parent is changing. Everything's changing in society. The rules are changing in society so quickly.
Yes.
So we don't know what to do, and being a parent is terrifying. So when my son was born, for 2 years, virtually every night, I had a reoccurring dream that he drowns and dies, and I didn't save him one single time. And I would wake up in a panic every night for 2 years. My wife had the same dream. We've got a debate currently about who had the dream first, but it was intense. So what does a parent do? We're like, oh shit, we got to teach this kid to swim, So we're like throwing him in the pool in the YMCA when he's like 2, like the videos, and he's swimming. And it turns out that dream's got nothing to do with swimming. Like, you don't have to be a big dream analyst to figure that out, right? It was my invitation to be a parent of what it meant to be a parent. I am not in control of this kid's outcome.
Yeah.
I'm a steward. And that's taught me a lot about how do I negotiate my son's use? What do I do about that? Right? Who am I supposed to be? What's my role in how do I negotiate with this? Right? And it's challenging. And luckily, my wife and I and my kids, we've had a dialogue about these things enough. And my wife and I have very different stances, but we both give each other space to have our different stances about this. And partly, I think, because there's such an honest dialogue and there's such a difference in how we are, right? My kids are figuring out how to have a relationship with this thing that we never learned how to do. And part of the reason for that is because we're just talking about it, right? And it's kind of an open dialogue. And part of the reason is because I'm not trying to save my kids, you know? And it's, I'll tell you what, man, there's like, I still today, my son's 19, my daughter is 21. I still today get that same knot in my gut that I had in that dream. Still is totally alive for me. That my desire is still there to protect my kids, but what I'm being asked to do as a parent is not that.
Yeah. Well, I want to learn a little bit more about making whole, but before I ask you that, the other thing when you went on that amazing conversation about a little bit about your story and your parents is that I think as parents, when we decide to look away, or if somebody tells us, a therapist or a coach says, okay, you need to look away and focus on doing this for yourself, we think our kids are going to think we don't love them, right? Like if I'm over here focused on my marriage and my own well-being and my own mental health and all of that, because you're going to figure it out. You got this. Come to me if you need help, but I believe in you. You've got this. We think we're sending this message of, I don't love you because I'm going to focus on me. And what I heard you say is the message
before you finish.
Yeah.
Will you give me your definition of what it means for a parent to love their kid? Yours, whatever that looks like.
Yes.
We're using the same words.
Love meaning I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to watch out for you. I'm going to help you solve your problems, because that's the message that we've gotten as you talk about this messed up, weird sense of parenting, is that we have to do all the things for them. And that equates to love. And I don't know where that happened.
What's your definition of loving your son today?
Letting him run his life and getting the heck out of the way.
Why is that love?
Because he does it so much better on his own than what I would do.
I interrupted. Now you can finish your question.
Yeah, no. I love that. So I'm so glad that you said that, because it gives us permission as parents to take the focus off of trying to solve all their problems and trying to step in and trying to rearrange their life and have the confidence. And it's so funny because I'll hear moms say, oh my gosh, my kid's so smart and they're so this and that. And in the next breath, but I have to do this and I have to do that and I have to solve this problem. And it's like, but those two things, they
don't work.
No. And so when you said what I heard, when my parents said, we're going to save our marriage, do your thing, you got this, is so helpful to know that the message can be very positive and empowering if we're willing to let them figure it out.
I think that the challenge, the panic, I believe that there's two things that make decisions for us. One is instinct and the other is mythology. That's how we inform what's safe and what's not safe. And so one of the things I've been thinking about is the girl who's got a stain on her prom dress and just loses the plot, has a panic attack and freaks out. Like, what's that about, right? And the message is, if you don't show up into the community in the right way, you will get discarded. And the reason why that message is deadly is that we're pack animals. You can't survive alone. And so at a very instinctual level, these stories we have about what it means to stay a part of society are life and death. That's how they get internalized in our brain, right? So our brain gets this message, this is safe or this is not safe. And then we internalize that experience that if I don't do this right, I'm going to get cast out. And so as with the advent, I think in particular of social media, but I think this has always been present for parents, is when there's more messaging about how you have to be or you will be discarded. It puts us into a survival instinct around parenting. And being in a survival instinct is very exhausting. And we don't use our highest minds. And at the moment we start asking the right questions about what does it mean to be a parent and why, the whole dialogue changes, And so just saying it out loud, there's so many movies, where the person that's in the panic doing everything for the person, like when it's shown hyperbolically, that person looks crazy.
Yes.
Yeah. It's very easy when we say that out loud. What is my job as a parent? To become that me. But if we say, what does it mean for a boy to become a man? That's a different conversation, right? And
Oh, yeah.
one of the things we know about everybody is that everybody has to suffer. You don't grow without suffering, right? And so if we look closely at what the model of being a parent is in today's world, it's about saving our kids from suffering. Yet we know every success story, a success story is 10 chapters long, 9 chapters are about failure. And the
Yes,
10th chapter is
100%.
about success.
Yeah.
So we're actually robbing and handicapping our kids from success at the point that we're taking away their right to suffer.
Yes.
I think one of the things that is really important to say is that we're all going to die. We are all going to die, and your kid might die. And that is unavoidable. There's nothing you will do as a parent that will keep your child from dying. And there's nothing as a parent you can do that will keep your kid from suffering. And those are facts, undeniable facts.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of the job of being a parent, and this was part of the message in that dream, is like, I don't get a say of when my kid's time is up. The only thing I have a say about is what happens while they're here. And so who do I want to be when my kid's not that?
Yeah.
Right? If what I'm trying to do is prevent what is an inevitability, I missed this moment, right? I've missed this moment. So we have a memorial wall here for all my friends and other colleagues who are dead. Parents of these people come here frequently, and see them and still will shed tears, The guy that was the earliest on that was probably 2009, and their parents are still wrecked by this, right? You don't recover from that fully. But what every one of the parents of people on that wall would give to have the struggle that any parent that's listening to this is in the midst of is everything. They would get everything to be in the crisis that you're in right now. And what they would give that for is for the opportunity to say some things that are really kind of like easy to say.
Yeah.
Like, I love you. I see you. They would take that opportunity to ask questions about who their kid is, what their kid needs. And I don't think it's a terribly difficult exercise to put yourself in the shoes of somebody who's lost a child.
Right.
And really ease into that and then consider, what would I want were my kid not here? And so rather than this exercise to prevent my kid from dying, the exercise of what do I do before that happens, it generates a whole different list of questions, whole different list of curiosities. And if anything, this meditation on the fact that your kid's going to die breeds so much more opportunity and freedom. And I think our panic to prevent that from happening just robs us of what is amazing and rich in life. And I guarantee you, all the parents who've lost children, like, none of them deserve that, like, none of us deserve that, but it's a fact. And there's no reason necessarily why it happened to them and not me, like the number of times where I've faced death in hindsight is like, there's no reason why my parents have me alive today and their grandchildren, and any one of these guys who passed away before having children that their parents don't,
No, it's so senseless. It's just, but
it's a fact.
Yeah, totally. Tell us a little bit about the people that work in your program. Who is it for? Who is it not for? And we'll obviously put links in the show notes to everything, but just give us an idea of who's a good fit, when's the right time, so that people have an understanding of that for making whole.
So the only requirement to be here is that you don't want to have sex with men. So people ask me this a lot, females a lot, and the general answer is no. But if a woman was genuinely unattracted to men, I would absolutely consider her. Because I don't want people having sex in the shop.
Yeah.
That
complicates
things. When men and women get together in early recovery, they have sex and it doesn't make sense and costs too much. Anyway, generally speaking, it's men. We've had men here as young as 17 and as old as 64.
Wow.
I do everything I can to keep a diverse age here. One of the things that happens when a bunch of 20-somethings get together, I think this is a huge problem with treatment, is that it creates this monocrop where the social rewards and hierarchy is it matches the maturity of whoever's there, right? And so if it's a bunch of 20-something-year-olds, the things that they identify and relate about has this self-fulfilling prophecy about it. One of the things we have a family style meal for lunch every day. And we've had as many as 10 apprentices and as few as 2 at any given time and staff. So, anywhere from 5 to 15 people sitting at lunch. The number of times since 2018 where the conversation has been about drug use, I can probably count on my hands. And there's not a rule that you can't talk about that. It's that what happens when you get into a group of people where everybody has a different experience is you have to find the common ground. And that's sort of the number of times where I've been around sober living or treatment centers where everybody's the same age. That's like the easiest thing to talk about. Right. So anyway, it's an age range. It's a big age range. I'm agnostic about most things when it comes to somebody's orientation of recovery. So like, I don't require much. What I require of everybody, and there's no rules here. There's not a rule book. The only rule is that you act like a man. And obviously people don't know how to do that when they get here, but that's the suggestion. And it turns out if you say that, you put a man in a group of men and say, act like a man. It turns out they all figure out a way.
They figure it out.
It's like, and they look at what other people do and they, typically behave accordingly. So the only requirement is somebody wants to be here and that they're willing to ask the questions about who they're meant to be. And so we have people that have sort of a traditional sort of treatment skeleton around them, whether that be therapists, sober living, AA meetings or NA meetings or whatever. And then we have other people that have a wholly different skeleton around them. And I'm agnostic about which one of those they are, provided the role that all those things serve in your life. Those roles are for a reason, right? The suggestion to go to a 12-step meeting is for a reason. And if somebody says, I don't want to go to 12-step, I don't like 12-step meetings, I don't care. A couple of things that come through 12 steps. One of them is a directive about work, personal work you need to do. One of them is a social network. And one of them is a level of rhythm and accountability in your life, right? So if you don't want to do that, that's fine. But those things are necessities in your life. Where are they coming from? Is the question, right? I find that a lot of people that get here are treatment fatigued. The reason why that's the case is because I'm not easy to find on the internet. I don't pay $100,000 a month to be at the top of Google like most people that are at the top of Google have to do. So as a result, people find me because they're out of options and they've done it too many times and their kids don't want to go to treatment anymore. So I'm fine with somebody who's treatment fatigued. I was treatment fatigued. I get it. We also have people that have never had treatment experience before come here. Those aren't the requisites necessarily, right? We've had plenty of people that have been dually diagnosed. Again, there have been some complicated cases. One of the 33 guys that I mentioned that I wouldn't classify as doing well, there was a real conversation with his family and his treatment team at the beginning about who is this guy and what can we do for him? And there was conclusions come amongst all of us. And I think that that's one of the things that we try to bring as a dialogue with anybody that wants to have it, and just an honest dialogue about how to participate in this journey of recovery. So a typical thing is people will come to this town and land in sober living because that's the easiest place to land and get a community and get a house and get a rhythm so that they come here every day, right? And then they follow whatever rules that are, or I'm agnostic about what sober living you go to. There are guys who don't live in sober living that come here. But what it always is, and this is true of everything that we do, is that it's a conversation about what are we trying to accomplish, right? So I don't have a rule structure based on a methodology that I believe is going to make everybody better. And in fact, I don't think methodologies make people better. I think practitioners get people better. And I think practitioners need methodologies to use to help people get better. And I think that's one of the things that's broken about treatment. I think people confuse methodology with efficacy, and I don't think it's true. I think practitioners is what gets people better. So I'm willing to use whatever method is necessary. The conversation needs to be about who are you meant to be. What I know is that people who become who they were meant to be, they don't have to return to addiction because they got better solutions in their life. And so that's what the entire conversation is going to be about. So people say, do I need to be sober? We've had people here who maybe they don't identify drugs as their principal problem, right? I'm anxious. I got anxious attachment or whatever. Will this fit? But I can get high and it's not a big deal or whatever. And my suggestion to them, and this is a typical kind of dialogue, is that when you're here, you respect the other people who are here. And if you walk into a room where everybody is negotiating what it means to be sober, you show up sober. And for the period of time you're here, you live as them, just like you would if you're in a Buddhist community and you say, well, I don't need to wear those monk outfits, right? Like, no, when you're here, you do that. And what you'll find out real quickly, if you've got an issue with that, perhaps this drugs aren't my problem is not a truthful thing. And so that's what we're going to uncover. We're going to have a conversation. If somebody's curious, they call me up and then we just have a conversation. What everybody's case is a series of, more often than not, straightforward problems that don't always have easy solutions, but there's always a simple solution when you look at all that problem, all the set of problems in progression, and talk about them individually. right? And so that's what we do. That's the method that I'll use with anybody that's here is, let's talk about what the problem is, for the family, for the individual, and then we're going to figure out how to meet that problem. And the way it looks on a day-to-day basis is that we build furniture. That's what we do. We build very nice furniture. I've been doing this for a long time. The other master craftsmen here are people with legitimate CVs who do high-end work. And the work that we produce is magazine quality work. We've been featured in lots of magazines. We have work that's literally all over the world. And we continue to basically build very nice things. And so guys that are coming here that don't know how to read a tape measure, in 2 weeks, we're going to be driving to West Palm Beach to upfit an entire house that's got an $800,000 TV that comes out of the ground. So that's the that's the work that we're doing. It's expensive work. It's nice work, and it's complicated work. It's work that stretches me. I fail regularly, and guys get to see that. So it's one thing to tell somebody to fail. It's another thing. Guys will absolutely see me and every other staff member here fail, and they get to see what happens. It's like a kid that scraped their knee that looks up. When I scrape my knee, they're going to look at me and say, how did Jeremy behave about that? And they're going to see the truth. I'm not manufacturing how I am. I'm going to be truthful about what that is, and they get to decide what it is they want to do with that. And so that's true of if I fail and I'm a child about it, they're going to see that. And that's one of the things I trust about people here. I'm not pretending for perfection, right? If I behave like a child, what I trust is that everybody here sees I behave like a child. And equally true, if I fail and I behave like somebody that believes there's opportunities in failure, then they're going to see that. And they're going to, more often than not, that's a much more attractive path to take in life. If failure is not something to be afraid of, instead it's an opportunity to succeed. And if they see that that's true for me, it's not something that I'm telling them from a PowerPoint presentation. They actually see that I've got risk and money on the line and reputation on the line, and I've broken something, and what do I do with it? And they see my response to that be that I recognize it as an opportunity, then they're gonna carry that with them for the rest of their lives.
Amazing. Well, I would say, going back to the very first thing that you said, that there's a story of a person, a guide or a mentor in people's success. And I have a feeling that in many people's stories, your name or Making Whole would be in that slot, just based on what we've talked about. It's really incredible. And I appreciate the depth of the conversation to really understand why these young people are continuing to struggle despite many, many, many treatment rounds. And I'm just so glad to know that there is something different. And I can't thank you enough for the conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're going to put links to your website in there. And it's really incredible. You can read the story of the owl. Everybody go look for an owl now at the rest of your day.
They'll show up. It's a fun story.
So thank you, Jeremy. I just appreciate it so, so much.
Thank you.